Hip-hop has always sold the fantasy of the come-up, the block to the billboard, the trap house to the penthouse. What nobody puts on the poster is how fast it can all get taken back. One indictment, one plea deal, one federal judge with a calendar, and a career that took a decade to build can get frozen overnight. And when these guys walk back out into the world has moved on without them. The fans found new favorites. The labels found new investments. The industry doesn't wait for anybody, not even the guy whose song was inescapable a few years ago. So today, we're looking at rappers who did the time, walked out the gate, and are now facing the hardest part. Quando Rondo. You'd think a guy who built his whole brand on street credibility would come home from federal prison to a hero's welcome. Not exactly how it played out for Quando Rondo. Before any of this, Tikvian Bowman was one of the fastest rising voices to come out of Savannah, Georgia. He linked up with NBA Youngboy's Never Broke Again camp, dropped hits like I Remember featuring Lil Baby and ABG, and built a devoted following off projects like Q-Pack and Recovery. He wasn't just a feature artist either. He had his own lane, his own sound, and a fan base that followed him from mixtape to mixtape through the late 2010s. Then came December 2023, when Bowman was arrested and hit with federal charges that originally accused him of conspiring to distribute methamphetamine, cocaine, fentanyl, and marijuana, a combination that could have put him away for up to 20 years. He struck a deal, pleading guilty to a single, lesser count of conspiracy to distribute marijuana. In December 2024, he was sentenced to 33 months in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release, and a $40,000 fine. At his sentencing, he apologized directly to his city. I really want to give an apology to the city of Savannah, he said, adding an apology to his family, his loved ones, and especially his daughters for what the case put them through. He ended up serving around 15 months at Edgefield Federal Correctional Institution in South Carolina before his sentence got trimmed down and he was transferred to a halfway house in Atlanta in June 2026, with his full release date landing November 11, 2026. So technically, Quando Rondo isn't even all the way out yet. He's in that in-between phase. Community confinement, still on paper, still rebuilding his footing before he can even think about stepping back into a studio the way he used to. Meanwhile, the sound he helped popularize has moved on without him. Other artists filled that lane, and streaming numbers don't pause for a federal docket. Whatever comeback he's got in him, he's starting it from a halfway house instead of a headline slot. But if you thought watching your momentum evaporate over a year and a half was rough, this next rapper had it worse. He didn't just lose time, he lost the label deal that made him famous in the first place. Bobby Shmurda. Bobby Shmurda wasn't just another rapper with a hit single. For about 6 months in 2014, he was the most viral person in hip-hop. Hot Nendade blew up so fast it's almost hard to explain if you weren't there for it. The song hit the top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100, the Shmoney dance became a nationwide meme, and Epic Records signed him within months of the record catching fire, reportedly for a deal worth around $2 million up front. He performed the song on Jimmy Kimmel Live just days before everything stopped. In December 2014, police arrested Shmurda as he left a Manhattan studio, and the raid that followed swept up 14 members of his GS9 crew. He was indicted alongside them on charges including conspiracy to commit murder and weapons possession. In 2016, he pleaded guilty to 4th-degree conspiracy and 2nd-degree criminal weapons possession, taking 7 years so that his close collaborator, Rowdy Rebel, would only have to serve 5 instead of the 12 prosecutors were originally offering him. I had to take one for the dogs, Shmurda later explained. He served 6 years before his release in February 2021, greeted by Quavo, who flew in on a private jet to pick him up personally. It looked like the beginning of a real comeback, but almost immediately, the fight that actually defined his post-prison years wasn't with the streets, it was with his own label. He accused Epic of sitting on his career for years, writing in one now-deleted post that he hadn't controlled his own music since he was 19, and that the label was prolonging my career. He publicly begged to be let out of the deal, comparing it to still being locked up. I still feel like I'm in prison, he wrote. Epic eventually released him from the contract. Here's the number that tells the real story. According to Celebrity Net Worth, Shmurda's net worth sat at roughly $400,000 at the time of his release, a fraction of what a 5-time platinum single and a major label deal should have generated for an artist at his level. Some estimates put the money he lost to legal fees and years of frozen earning potential at close to $10 million. He's kept working since, launching his own independent label and dropping new music, but Hot and Say happened over a decade ago now, and Bobby Shmurda has never come close to that height again. Maybe Shmurda's situation makes a little more sense when you consider what happens when a comeback depends entirely on rebuilding a fan base from scratch, in an industry that's already moved 3 trends past whatever you were doing when you left. Fetty Wap. Few artists had a bigger run than Fetty Wap in 2015. Trap Queen spent 25 consecutive weeks on the Billboard Hot 100. He landed 3 top 10 hits that same year. He won BET's Best New Artist. For a minute, Willie Jr. Maxwell II was one of the biggest names in the entire genre. Then in October 2021, just a week after dropping his project The Butterfly Effect, he was arrested on federal drug trafficking charges tied to a conspiracy involving more than 500 grams of cocaine. He was ultimately sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. The timing gutted whatever momentum his comeback project had. While he was locked up, hip-hop kept generating new stars, new sounds, new viral moments, and Fetty Wap simply wasn't there for any of it. He ended up serving a little over 3 years before being released early on January 8, 2026, roughly 11 months ahead of his original release date. But the terms of his freedom tell you how far the fall really was. He's under federal supervision in Philadelphia for the next several years, with restrictions that include mandatory drug testing, a ban on alcohol unless prescribed, regular check-ins with a probation department, and he even needs permission before he can open a new bank account. This is a guy who once had 3 songs simultaneously charting in the national top 10, and now he needs a probation officer's approval to manage his own money. To his credit, he didn't waste his time inside. He got his GED and took HVAC courses, telling reporters he wanted a real backup plan in case the music didn't come back the way it used to. A stunning admission from someone who once had a diamond certified single. He's out now. He's released a comeback album called Xavier, featuring Wiz Khalifa and G Herbo, and a 2025 TikTok trend brought again back onto the charts. But rebuilding a career after a 6-year federal sentence in an industry that has already replaced you twice over is a very different fight than the one that made him famous in the first place. Right now, Fetty Wap is grinding to get back a fraction of what he had in 2015, all while doing it under a level of government supervision that most artists his stature have never had to think about. Fetty at least came home to a fan base that never turned on him. This next rapper found out the hard way that the money isn't always the thing you lose. Sometimes it's everybody around you. Gunna. In early 2022, Gunna was about as hot as any rapper in the country. His album DS4 ever debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, moving 150,000 units in his first week. He had hit records with Drake, Future, and Roddy Ricch, a genuine pop culture footprint, and a reputation as one of the smoothest, most commercially reliable voices to come out of Atlanta's melodic trap scene. Then in May 2022, Gunna, real name Sergio Kitchens, was swept up in a massive RICO indictment alongside Young Thug and more than 24 others, part of a sprawling case alleging that Thug's label and crew, YSL, was functioning as a criminal street gang. Gunna sat in Fulton County Jail for months, with his bond denied repeatedly. In December 2022, he took what's called an offered plea, pleading guilty to 1 racketeering count while still maintaining his innocence, a legal maneuver that let him accept the plea deal's consequences without technically admitting he did what he was accused of. That single decision cost him more than the 7 months he'd already spent locked up. Footage from his plea hearing leaked, showing Gunna telling prosecutors that YSL must end, and within days, the entire hip-hop internet had decided he'd snitched. His attorney pushed back hard. Gunna did not snitch to get out of jail, his lawyer wrote publicly, insisting he'd made no statements against any co-defendant and had zero intention of testifying against anyone. It didn't matter. Lil Durk, Lil Baby, and other former collaborators publicly distanced themselves from him. A charity event Gunna had planned to hand out $100,000 in gift cards to families in need got canceled days after his release, with police citing security concerns. People he'd built his entire career alongside simply stopped returning calls. His first post-release album, A Gift and a Curse, still moved 83,000 copies in his first week, respectable numbers by most standards, but a real step down from the 150,000 he'd done just over a year earlier. And industry observers pointed directly at both the lack of promotion and the snitch allegations as the reason. He kept grinding anyway. His single, Fukumin, eventually broke through to #4 on the Hot 100, and by 2024, he'd packed out Brooklyn's Barclays Center on his own headlining run. But the damage to his standing inside the culture never fully went away. Where Thug, Durk, and Baby used to be regular collaborators, Gunna's post-prison albums came out with almost no features from his old circle, a quiet but unmistakable sign of exactly who was still willing to work with him and who wasn't. That backup plan Fetty built for himself points to something even more brutal. What happens when the money you made at your peak doesn't just slow down, it gets legally taken away from you before you even go inside? Blueface. Blueface built his entire career on being unpredictable, and for a while, that unpredictability made him rich. His breakout single, Thosiana, hit #8 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 2019, later boosted by remixes with Cardi B and YG that pushed the song past 300 million views on YouTube alone. He signed with Cash Money Records, dropped a full-length album featuring DaBaby, Gunna, and Lil Baby, and built a net worth that outlets estimated at anywhere from $4 to $7 million, all off an offbeat flow nobody else in the genre was doing. But Blueface's legal troubles were piling up long before he ever went to prison. There was a felony gun charge in 2019, an arrest for shooting at a car outside a gas station, and by October 2022, he was facing attempted murder charges tied to a shooting outside a Las Vegas strip club. A courtroom eventually hit him with a judgment of $13 million over the incident, a number that grew to roughly $14 million once interest and penalties were factored in, more money than his entire estimated net worth at the time. Then in August 2024, a Los Angeles judge sentenced him to 4 years in prison, not for a new crime, but for violating probation tied to a 2021 assault on a security guard. He'd already served over 400 days by that point, which knocked the sentence down to around 3 years, and his manager publicly predicted he'd only end up serving 9 to 10 months, thanks to time served credits. He was ultimately released on November 3, 2025, after roughly 2 years total behind bars. But the Las Vegas case came with its own separate set of probation terms waiting for him on the outside. No alcohol or drugs, staying away from the Las Vegas Strip, mandatory impulse control counseling, and regular probation check-ins, conditions that read more like a leash than a comeback plan. Here's what makes Blueface's situation different from the others. His net worth reports still put him somewhere between $4 and $7 million, so on paper, he's not broke. But that number sits directly underneath the $14 million judgment he still owes, meaning the man is walking around technically underwater no matter what his bank account says. Add in years of paused touring, paused releases, and a probation structure built to catch the smallest misstep, and you've got a rapper whose entire post-prison plan is less about building something new and more about not losing the rest of what he's got left. Blueface's story is about money that got taken by a courtroom. This last one is about money that got taken by the people he trusted to keep him out of a courtroom in the first place. Boozy Badazz. Boozy Badazz has been dealing with the legal system for 2 decades. He served 5 years in Louisiana State Prison on a marijuana charge, narrowly avoided a murder conviction back in 2012, and has cycled through arrests and altercations for most of his career, including getting pulled off a national tour in 2021 after a fight broke out on stage at one of his own shows. By his own account, he spent more of his adult life fighting cases than most rappers spend fighting for chart positions. His most recent battle started in May 2023, when federal prosecutors charged him with being a felon in possession of a firearm after he appeared on an Instagram live video with a gun visibly tucked into his waistband. That charge alone carried up to 10 years in prison and $250,000 in fines. Facing that number, Boozy made a decision that had nothing to do with a courtroom strategy. In 2025, he paid 2 political operatives, Jack Berkman and Jacob Wohl, $600,000 to lobby the Trump White House for a presidential pardon that would wipe the federal case away entirely. On New Year's Day, his lawyer got a call telling him the pardon had already been signed and was just waiting on an announcement. Boozy waited. January 31st, the contractual deadline in his agreement with the lobbyists came and went. No pardon ever surfaced. When Boozy asked for the refund his contract promised if they failed, the lobbyists stalled, then claimed their firm was essentially bankrupt from unrelated fines and couldn't pay him back at all. $600,000 was taken from me, Boozy wrote publicly, naming the men involved and posting the emails to back it up. In the end, Boozy's actual gun case resolved without the pardon he paid for. A federal judge sentenced him to 3 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and a $50,000 fine, a far lighter outcome than the 10 years he was originally facing, and one that had nothing to do with the $600,000 he'd already handed over. That means the pardon he paid for was never actually necessary to keep him out of prison, which makes the loss sting even worse. As of this year, he's suing to try to recover at least $300,000 of it, but the men he's chasing say the money is already gone. So Boozy walked out of his federal case with his freedom, but with several $100,000 less than he started with, and a very public, very current reminder that even after you've survived prison once, the system built to help you avoid it a second time can take just as much as the sentence would have. Boozy's story is about a man who already survived prison once getting robbed on the way out the door. This last case is about what happens when the years of freedom themselves become the thing you never really get back. NBA Youngboy. Kentrell Gaulden, better known as NBA Youngboy, has been one of the most streamed artists in the entire genre for years running, releasing albums at a pace almost nobody else in hip-hop can match. But underneath all those numbers has been a legal shadow that's followed him since he was a teenager, and it finally caught up to him in a way that swallowed years of his adult life. His most recent case traces back to April 2020, when he was arrested alongside 15 others, after federal agents found over a dozen guns at a music video shoot in Baton Rouge. As a convicted felon, simply being near those weapons was enough to trigger federal firearm charges. What followed wasn't a quick trial, it was over 3 years of legal limbo, with Youngboy living under house arrest while his case dragged through the system. Then in April 2024, while he was still confined to his home in Utah, authorities arrested him again, this time for running a prescription drug fraud ring and additional weapons charges. He eventually pleaded guilty to the original firearm charge, receiving a 23-month federal sentence, 5 years of supervised release, and a $200,000 fine. He served 11 months at FCY Talladega in Alabama before his release on March 24, 2025, transferred to a residential re-entry facility in Arizona ahead of his official date. But here's the part that doesn't show up on a highlight reel. Add up the years of house arrest before the sentence even started, then the 11 months actually locked up, and Youngboy spent close to half a decade of his career with his movement controlled by the government in one form or another, unable to tour freely, unable to travel without permission, unable to simply live like an artist at his level normally would. And it isn't over. His 5 years of supervised release come loaded with conditions most artists never have to think about, including mandatory drug and alcohol screenings, mental health evaluations, and substance abuse counseling, plus a $200,000 fine hanging over him the whole time. Youngboy's catalog numbers are still enormous, and that's exactly what makes his case different from the others on this list. He didn't come home broke in the traditional sense. What got taken from him were the years themselves. The stretch of his 20s that should have been the most active touring, most unrestricted period of his career, spent instead answering to probation officers and court-ordered evaluations instead of building on the momentum he'd already earned. That's the part of this genre that doesn't make it into the highlight reels. The come-up gets the montage, the fall gets the headline, but the rebuild, the actual grinding to get back what you lost, that's the part that takes years and doesn't come with a guarantee. Some of these guys will get back to where they were, some never will. That's just the reality of betting your whole life on an industry and a street that doesn't hold your spot while you're gone. And if you enjoyed this one, you'll definitely want to check out these videos on your screen next. Have a good one.